Welcome back to Designsmith. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do this really cool blur effect on this piece of art that I found on Pinterest. Before we get started, please subscribe to support the channel. Alright, so there's probably plenty of ways to do this. However, I prefer doing this in Photoshop. So we're going to adapt this into a poster for the Sundays, and I'll lay out all of the typography here, and then we'll carry the typography from Illustrator into Photoshop. Alright, so I'm in here on my Swiss grid file, so I'm going to select all my guides and hit copy. And now we're going to paste, and now we'll get this centered up exactly where it needs to be. And now we'll go up to View, Guides, and Lock Guides. Okay, so when you're doing an effect like this, it's usually best to use a nice clean sans serif typeface. So I'm going to use the font Manrope, and I'm just going to lay out some type here. Okay, so in yesterday's video, I was talking about the importance of laying out your guides to get a nice consistent grid so that you can align your elements to the grid specifically. However, this is one of those times where I want the type to actually go all the way to the edge of the poster. And you may have noticed that I aligned to the top of the actual type where there are no ascenders, because you can see the ascenders right here. And that's actually where I want my type to be. And so in this case, it's perfectly fine that the type is not adhering to the grid at a specific point. And now I'll duplicate this over here, and I'll fill out the rest of the information. All right, and then I'll put a little placeholder right here for an image, and we'll go all the way to there. All right, and now I'm going to draw a rectangle with no fill and no stroke. That's exactly the same size as my artboard here. And we'll make sure that it's perfectly centered and exactly the same size as the artboard. So we're going to select everything. I'm going to hit copy. And I'm here in Photoshop, and my size is 18 by 24 at 300 resolution. And now I'm going to hit paste and paste as a smart object. And now we'll need to align this exactly right there. And so the purpose of doing this is so I can bring over the elements separately while also maintaining the correct positioning for them. So we'll select the Sundays here, paste this as a smart object, make sure that our sizing is 100%, and we'll align this exactly where our original placeholder was. Okay, we have our three elements here, and now we can delete our original layer that has everything, and now all of these are on their own separate layers. So I'm gonna label these real quick. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and drop the image of the band in here. All right, I've got this image, and we're just gonna click and drag this up here. And I'm gonna place this on top of our photo frame. And I'm gonna select both layers. I'm gonna hold down Option on Mac and Alt on Windows until I get that little arrow right there. Then I'm just gonna click. And now that's gonna restrict that image inside of that container. So we can enlarge this, and it doesn't go outside of our container here. And now we'll just kind of play around with this, get this exactly where we want. And I'm going to go ahead and add a background that is not 100% white because I'm going to add a little bit of grain to the top layer here. So I'll go with 95%, but I want to change the hue to something that's a little bit more orange because I actually want to add a little bit of saturation here, maybe about 5%. All right, I'm going to add a layer of grain up here, and we're going to fill it with 50% gray. Go up here to Filter, Noise, and Add Noise. And I don't want a lot, just a little bit, maybe around 20%. And I'll change our blending mode to overlay. So we've got a nice consistent light layer of grain going across the entire poster. And one thing that we need to do is double click on our thumbnail, go back into Illustrator, and change this from 100% black to about 10% black. And now that noise layer shows up there too. And we'll do the same thing to the info layer here. Okay, that grain is now showing there, and it's looking good. Okay, so now to get that cool blur effect, we need to add a Gaussian blur to both layers of type. And because the Sundays type is larger than the rest of the info, we need to add different levels of Gaussian blur. So with our Sundays type selected, we're going to go up to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian blur. And it's a nice large piece of type, so it does need to be a little bit on the larger side, but we need to make sure that it's still legible. And I think 50 pixels will be just fine. And we'll hit OK. And if we need to, we can just kind of move it over a little bit, because when we blurred it, it created that line at the very top of the type. Okay, now let's go to the info type and add a Gaussian blur there as well. And obviously 50 is going to be too high, so let's bring it down to about 10 and hit OK. And what I want to do is go ahead and group the photo and the frame into its own group and just call this photo. And I want to bring the photo all the way to the top. And now this is where we apply our effect. We're going to click on top of the type layer, but below the photo layer. And we're going to go to create a new fill or adjustment layer, and we're going to add threshold. And there's our really cool blur type effect here. And you can go in and change the intensity of this if you want, but you want to make sure that it's still legible. I think around 110 is looking good. And because we added it on top of the text but below the photo, it's not affecting the photo. So if you want it to affect the photo, just bring it on top of the photo. But it's obviously too strong for that. And you may be saying, well, what happened to our nice grain layer? Well, it is technically still there, and we need to change our blending mode from overlay to hard light. And now we have that layer of grain while also still having that cool blur type effect. And one last thing that I'll do is go into our photo layer, click on the photo frame, and go up to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur, and put like a 3-pixel blur on this. That way we don't have that super sharp, clean edge there, and it can look like the ink is bleeding into the paper. And this grain layer is a little bit on the heavy side, so let's bring it down to about 70%. And here it is, our Sunday's Nashville concert poster with that cool blur type effect that we found on Pinterest. I hope this video was helpful to you. If it was, please give it a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.